This is Jill Pack with the Seasons of Joy podcast, and this is episode number 77 entitled A Conversation with Jennie Dildine, the LDS Mission Coach. Are you a woman of faith who is struggling to navigate your current season of life? Do you feel like life is just happening to you instead of for you? My name is Jill Pack. I'm a certified life coach and a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I want you to know that no matter your season or circumstance, it is possible to create a more joyful life. And I would love to show you how. Are you ready? Let's go. Hello, friends. Welcome to the Seasons of Joy podcast. I am so happy you're here. Before I get started on today's episode, I'm going to make another plug about an awakening retreat that's going to be held this October 5th through 7th. And I am so excited about this retreat. I have some special guests that are bringing so much goodness to this experience. One of these guests is my dear friend, Shelly Bowman. She is a certified yoga instructor, and she has such a peaceful and calm way about her. And last year she came and provided the same opportunity. She took us through restorative yoga, and each day we participated in mindfulness and just some stillness. And it just adds such a beautiful element to this overall retreat experience. And so I'm so excited for those of you that come to participate and to experience all the goodness Shelly has to bring to this retreat. So if you haven't signed up yet, it's not too late. You just need to click the link in the show notes to take you to learn more about it and to register. So I would love to have you join us. It's going to be a wonderful experience. So now on to today's episode. This is a fun one for me. I recently was hired by Jennie Dildine to help in her coaching program, where she coaches missionaries that are getting ready to serve a mission, or those that are recently returning home or getting ready to return home. And this has been such a fun experience for me. And so I just wanted to give people a chance to learn more about Jennie and the work that she does. And I feel honored to be able to have this conversation and to be able to work with her in this amazing work. So here's my conversation with Jennie. All right, I am here with Jennie Dildine, and I'm so excited to have her. I actually work for her now. So the timing of this podcast is really good because she has some fun things coming this fall. So I'm going to turn the time over to you, Jennie, let you introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about you and how you found coaching, and we'll go from there.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. My name is Jennie Dildine. I often refer to myself as the LDS Mission Coach because actually who I work with and who I've been coaching for about 4 years now is missionaries in all different stages of the mission experience, preparing, currently serving, returned missionaries. I live in Boise, Idaho. I like to say that I'm on the western side of the state for a little more, the weather's a little more temperate on this side of the state. I have 5 children. I have actually 2 married sons, both that served missions, and actually it also so happens that my 2 daughters-in-law served missions. And then I have a son that actually just got dropped off in Orem yesterday. My son left him there. He's a senior, but he was a senior last year. He's going to be a freshman, but he's also on the autism spectrum. And so we're not really sure how that's going to go. My husband said that he ended up kind of crying when he said goodbye to him, which he wasn't expecting, but we just all have our fingers crossed that he's going to thrive and be successful down there. And then I have a daughter that's a junior this year. And then my baby, in air quotes, she just started middle school. So we have always been doing basically all ages, all stages. I remember like trying to potty train my daughter while my oldest son was playing varsity basketball, and I just couldn't figure out how you would potty train when you have basketball games that you have to be at. And so we've been doing all the stages for a while. I came to coaching, actually. It is a funny story because it does really coordinate with my niche with missionaries. I just remember, and maybe a lot of your listeners can relate to this, is I remember when my oldest son left on his mission. It was the same year that my youngest started kindergarten. And I just remember feeling really like lost, and like I didn't know like what my purpose was. And then all of a sudden, like it felt like my role, right, was changing from just like always being the caretaker. And now I'm going to have this like young adult son. And it was just like a really, and then there was this other piece too, where I felt like I was kind of closing a chapter of my life where all of my kids were under one roof. And so, it just felt really like emotionally kind of tumultuous for me. I was like, I don't know who I am. I don't know what to do with my life. And I think it's maybe one of the best kept secrets in our church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, is how painful it is to send a missionary away. You really do have to go through sort of like a mourning, or like almost like someone died, but then you sort of feel like you shouldn't feel that way because he didn't actually die and he's doing some good stuff. But so I was just going through a lot of stuff, and I'll never forget that I was like crying in the bathroom one morning, and um I was like, I just don't know what to do with my life. And my husband said to me, well, maybe you need a life coach. And at that time, I had like no concept of what that was. I don't think he had a concept of what that was. It was just in his mind, like, oh, it makes sense. She needs help with her life. So she needs a life coach. And so it was immediately then that I searched podcasts, and as you know, Jody Moore really well as well, Jill, but I found her podcast, and the more I started listening, and then I went to a couple of her in-person events, and I saw the transformation that it made in my own life, and the change. It was sort of like nothing in my life had changed, and yet everything was different because I was seeing it different, and I had so much more ownership over my experiences. And so I was able to sort of start to take that into like the letters that I would write to my son. And then when the one son came home, we had 4 weeks together until my other son left. And so anyway, so that's sort of how I came to coaching. And then I really honed in on missionaries about the time my oldest son was coming home. I just started noticing this trend in his letters, like, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. Like he like this dread sort of like started coming through in everything that he was saying. And like, I don't want this to end, and I don't know what's next. And I started thinking about how we, as in our faith tradition, really work to prepare our kids to go on missions. And then they come home and we're like, okay, good luck. Like, I hope this works out for you. And I started really seeing that. And then I was talking to one mom in my stake, and her daughter was coming home about the same time. And she said, I'm just not looking forward to my daughter coming home, because then she won't have a purpose anymore. And that was like, I think my like nail in the coffin. Like, I need to help here. Like that thought, first of all, is so damaging. Second of all, is not even true. That's not even true. And it's a thought that a lot of return missionaries have, I think, but it's just not true. And so I originally started sort of in the return missionary space, because that's, what I was seeing in my son and things like that. And then the more I worked in the return missionary space, the more I was having moms email me and send me messages on Instagram and Facebook and just be like, oh my gosh, help, my son on the mission or my daughter on the mission is just like drowning. Like, they're just suffering. They can't, they're not doing well at all. How can we help? And then So I started kind of working in that space. And then I just, in my mind, it was like, if we could get these tools to the kids before they leave, what a powerful impact that could have. Because not only then do we eliminate sort of that suffering that happens on the mission, but then the transition when they get home is so much more manageable. And it's actually been a fun, I don't know, experiment. The kids that I've worked with before they leave, their parents usually reach out like a month before they're about to come home. I've been doing it long enough, right? That they've worked with me and now they're coming home. And the moms are usually like freaking out a little bit, like, we're going to need your help. They're going to need so much support. And this is such a hard time. And in my mind, I already know that they're going to be just fine. And without exception, after working with hundreds of clients, without exception, if they've gotten the help before, they don't need it again when they get home. And I think that's the power of coaching. And I think you understand this too, is once you understand those tools, they're not just for your use like in this moment, they apply in every aspect of your life and every single challenge that comes up on an ongoing basis. Many of my clients are now married and having babies, and they just take those with them. In fact, I just had one client that I worked with a while ago. She was an early returned missionary, which I don't like to call it early returned. I like
Yeah.
to say they came home sooner than they were planning, and I happened to just like her Instagram post or something like that, and she just sent me a message and she's like, you have no idea how you changed my life. And we worked together probably 3 years ago, and now she's married, and but
Mm-hmm.
she can take those tools with her, ongoing, and that is the power of it, I think.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's so applicable to the niche I work with outside of your business
Mhm,
is the mothers of these kids, right?
mhm,
Going on a mission. But I just think that that's why I named my practice seasons coaching.
mm,
Think that these tools that we teach are so applicable in every season.
mhm,
And to touch on the idea of purpose, I think that is something that we do a disservice when we don't teach this concept or understand it is that the purpose isn't what you are doing. It's
mhm,
why you do anything. What's
mhm,
your why? Your what is going to change all
mhm,
the time, depending on your season, right? Whatever you're doing in the moment, your why oftentimes stays the same because your why is trying to add good to the world or be the best person you can be. Like that's really good purpose,
yeah,
So I love that that's what I have found in coaching. It's like no matter what season I'm in, those tools are just as applicable and just more opportunity to fine tune them,
absolutely.
right?
It is sort of like a coaching, I feel, is like a practice. It's not like an arrival point,
Yeah.
right? We'll probably dive more into that, as far as I think that can tend to be one of the hard things about having like a missionary. One of the things is they think that there is some sort of endpoint, like that there's a good place to be and a not good place to be and a good place spiritually to be. And I think that's why it kind of becomes problematic with this purpose, is like, I've already met my purpose. It was on the mission. Now what? Um, but I do think it's an ongoing just practice.
Yeah. So what do you think? I have one thing I've noticed. So maybe I'll share that and then have you share kind of what you notice that maybe that age group struggles with the
Mhm,
most.
mhm,
Um, in a lot of the conversations I have, and just even as recent as Sunday,
mm,
one of the young adults in our ward was bearing her testimony and talking about trying to make the right decision.
mm, mhm,
And I have so many conversations with young adults that they just want to make the right choice. And sometimes I just want to shake them and go, they're all good choices.
mm,
You're going to be fine. Whatever you choose is going to work in your favor. But they
mhm,
get so caught up with making the right choice of all these awesome choices usually
Mhm.
that they put so much pressure on themselves, and then they have a hard time choosing because they're so afraid of choosing the wrong choice or the thing that won't work out. So
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to speak to that and then maybe
Sure.
speak to what else you have found.
Yeah. I agree with that, and I think one of the things that kind of, um, contributes to this, right, is sort of this idea. I think there's a couple things that kinda go into this, is this idea that somehow we can please our heavenly parents and displease them, right? That somehow, and then I think the other component is, like, that somehow there is a path for me that, and I don't think we understand this logically, but, like, we sort of think if things are going well, that means that I've done good or I've done right,
Mhm.
which doesn't take into account that life just isn't like that. And so I think when we're making decisions, we often think, well, where will I experience like the least amount of resistance? Where will I experience the least amount of like sort of quote unquote negative emotion, right? So I think there's this piece, just a confidence piece before God or before our heavenly parents, which is like I have to please them. I have to know their mind before I can make up my own mind. And then yeah, so one of the analogies that I like to talk about with this decision making, and I've shared this with you because it's one of the things that we teach in our program, is that I think sometimes we think of like God like the ocean, right? And when we're about to make a decision, we're like, walk up to the ocean and we're like, hey, God, what should I do? We just shout out to the ocean and we're just waiting for him to say something back. But what we forget is that when we were created, like they took a bucket of the ocean and poured it into us. And so I really believe that every access to like godly wisdom, we have access to because we're his, like we're actually his literal sons and daughters. And so I loved, and then the other piece of that is that they made us to be creators. And so I love to think of, I think sometimes as young adults, we think we're like on some sort of like a monopoly board or a video game or something like that. If I go this way, that's right. And if I go this way, then it's wrong. And I like to think of it much more that we're creators like our heavenly parents. And every day they're not up there going, oh my gosh, I hope Jennie gets it right. Every day they're like, oh my gosh, I cannot wait to see what Jennie creates. And we've given her, I mean, it gives me goosebumps actually to think about it, but we've been given everything we need to create whatever we want. And you know, we could talk about like the scriptures or the gospel or the atonement and all of that kind of thing, but more I think just within our own bodies, we have minds
Mhm.
and we have souls and we have hearts. So we have whatever we want to create is all available to us when we were created. And so
Yeah,
it's not as much about like, am I going to get this right or get this wrong? And I think this has helped a lot of the clients that I've worked with. Is like, no, but what do you want to create? And I'm not talking about like a painting. It's like you and I created this podcast, right?
mhm.
We can create a conversation. We can create an email. We can create a paper or an assignment. We can create, I love when Elder Uchtdorf talks about his wife like creating eggs, that she was really good at making eggs or something. Do you remember that talk?
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. And so I
Yeah,
think when we can let go of thinking that it has to be a certain way or that we have to please them in some way,
yeah,
it really does set you free and it frees you up to create um create whatever you're meant to create and be whoever you're meant to be.
yeah. I love that idea, and don't you think, like, added to it is, like, they're cheering us on in the creating,
Totally.
right? It's not a critiquing of the creating, it's an encouragement of the creating, and they
Mhm.
know we're gonna get it wrong sometimes, or it's not gonna go smooth or turn out exactly like we hope, but it's like, well, what can we create with that? Okay,
Mhm.
this is different than I thought. Now what can I create? Because things have changed a bit. That's,
Mhm.
so I love that idea of like, we were born to be creators. It's in our DNA. Like,
Mhm.
that's a pretty cool thought. If we
Yeah.
really let that sink in, right? Like, I am a creator like God
Mhm. Yeah.
in embryo. Like, we're learning what that all means,
Mhm.
right? That's why we're here, is to figure out what that all means. So,
And I even think about, like, instead of thinking, like, sometimes we're gonna get it wrong, I don't even really
mm,
believe that.
yeah,
I believe, like, that let's think of your painting as sort of like this masterpiece, right? At the end of your life or the end of your eternal existence. I don't know when the painting ever
right,
stops, but,
right.
like, there's gonna be like, I was talking to one of my clients who's, like, an artist. She's, like, an art major, and I was like, "Picture what a painting would look like if it only had highlights,
Yeah.
if it only had white, if it only had, like, really, like, bright colors, there would be no you couldn't create shadow, you couldn't create depth, you couldn't create any, um, sort of shape to even understand what a shape was without, like, those dark kind of strokes that have to come in and create that shadow and create that bend in the river, or create that shadow over the back of the hill or whatever it is. And so I like to actually just think about it more like instead of like, "I got that wrong,"
Mhm.
like, this is just kind of a maybe what we would call, like, a darker part of my painting or a rough, you know, n no, dark doesn't sound like a good way to describe it, but there's this kind of shadow place where maybe I was
Yeah.
discouraged for a long time or something was going on with my kids that felt really hard, but we need that piece too. It doesn't mean it was
Yes.
going wrong. It is actually part of what is necessary to create who you are and to create
Yes.
great painting.
Yes, I love how you articulated that, because that's really how, and I've heard you speak to this too, is just I have always considered, since I came into coaching and everything, I consider joy all of it. Like, when
Mhm.
you look at that painting, you're filled with joy
Mhm.
because of all the pieces to it, right? The bitter helps us really understand the sweet, the rough of, I look at a mountain and the brush, but getting up to the vista wouldn't have been as beautiful had I not climbed the mountain, right? And so the joy is the whole journey of it, the shadows and the highlights and all of that. So I love that. I love
Yeah,
that visual of the painting. I think that
yeah, and
describes it very well.
I think it's, like, one of the things I've been thinking about lately is, like, we're not even saying, like, that it's fun or easy, those dark
Right.
I think we kind of mistake joy for, like, "Oh, well, then it must be happy or it must be easy," when instead the joy is like a surrender to or like a really embracing of the depth that's created within your own, like, person and soul. And even within the person and soul of your kids when they're going through stuff, um, and knowing that, through Jesus Christ, like, all of that sanctified for our growth and learning
Mhm.
and progress.
Yeah, totally. I love that. So I want you to speak to, like, what would you say is something else you've noticed that these young adults, these missionaries leaving or coming home or on their mission, what would you say is one of the biggest things
Mm,
that they struggle with?
mhm. Yeah, and I mean, I could talk for a while about it, but, I think what I would say is, like, the overarching thing, and I think there's a lot of, like, kind of I don't know if we were thinking of an octopus, like, a lot of arms that would come off of this one concept, and it actually kind of ties into this decision-making thing as well, is not just that they're worried they're gonna do it wrong, but they're worried that they are wrong, that there's something wrong with them.
Mm,
And so, um, I think it's sort of a product of the society we've grown up in. I think it's also sort of a product of some of our faith traditions about like, well, we should always be happy and we live after the manner of happiness. And then what quickly follows after that is if you're not happy, there's something wrong. Like if you're anxious, if you're overwhelmed, if you're sad, then something must be off or something must be wrong. And in fact, I recently was talking to a lady and she told me that her son's companion was having her son was having a little bit of like a few days of sadness and things like that. And his companion said, well, if you're feeling that way, you're doing the mission wrong. Like, where are you not being obedient? And it's just, that's not the way it works. We just are human, and we're going to experience, like we've sort of been saying, like these vistas and the brush, and we're going to experience the highs and the lows. And so I think this, of course, then plays into their confidence and their decision making. It plays into their relationships. It plays into their self-worth. So I would say, not only are they worried about that they're doing it wrong, they're worried that they're feeling wrong, that the way they feel means there's something wrong with them. And then I would take it so far as to say that they're worried that they're thinking wrong too. Like, one of the things, I hear a lot is like, I'm not good enough. And I think there's one course where we could say, oh, well, that's just not true. You are good enough. But I think what our young adults hear, and we'll say things like, don't think that, you shouldn't think that.
Mm.
And what our young adults hear is like, oh, well, there must be something wrong with me if I think that. But what you and I know, because of our human brain, I'm not good enough, is just a thought our brain offers us, usually to just shut us down. I have that thought come up all the time, especially lately, since I'm doing some big stuff in my business.
Yeah.
Like pretty much gets to be that thought, gets to be like a little friend of mine that comes along in the car for the ride. And so I think one of the biggest things that can help is just normalizing and validating where they are.
Yeah.
If they're
Yeah.
feeling anxious, not like you shouldn't be anxious, or how can we get you out of anxiety? But just like, oh yeah, it makes so much sense. You're feeling anxious. How can I help? I feel anxious all the time too, right? Instead of don't feel anxious or you shouldn't think that way. When we kind of make those comments, we're playing into this idea that yes, there is something wrong if you don't think this way, if you don't feel this way, if you don't behave this way. And what I find, right, is there can be a missionary or a return missionary who is feeling sad or discouraged or overwhelmed or homesickness. And there's just that feeling, which, our bodies were built to process that emotion. And you've probably talked a lot about it, I would guess, on your podcast about how to process that emotion. But then what we do is we layer on this shame that we shouldn't be feeling homesick, or if we were more obedient, we wouldn't be feeling sad, or if we were more strictly obedient, then we wouldn't be feeling whatever. And none of that's just true. We just are going to have emotions because we're human with human thoughts and human brains. And so I think I see that as like the biggest problem is that they start to think there's something wrong with them.
Yeah.
And that shame comes in, and then that just like spirals downward fast.
Yeah. Well, and sadly, I think we all sometimes, when we aren't aware of it, we model that, right? Because even as adult women, there are times when we think that we're wrong, that something's wrong with us, and they see that, right? It's a behavior that they see modeled all around them. And so it's easy to go to. It's easy that, although that must be the solution, then it's me. Something's wrong with me. So I love that. So speaking to the adults, right? The mothers that are of these adult children, you said this. So normalize, validate.
Yeah, those are kind of
Just
my two, like,
repeat that,
those are
right?
kind of my two go-to is like normalize, validate, repeat. And normalize kind of sounds, it's usually like that makes so much sense. So you're like, I'm thinking that all of my friends hate me. our tendency, right? Because we don't want that pain in our child or in our young adult or whatever. Our tendency is to be like, "Oh my gosh, that's not true." But normalize sounds like when your kid says, I think all of my roommates hate me, say, "Oh my gosh, it makes so much sense you think that. Aren't our brains funny?" Right? That's normalized. This makes so much sense. And then validate, I always think of, and it's okay. So I think all my roommates hate me. Oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. And it's okay that you think that. Totally not true. Probably not true. But it's okay that your brain is offering that to you.
Yeah. And don't you find once you can normalize and validate, the walls kind of come down,
Mhm.
right? Then there's this letting go of
Mhm.
that they're doing it wrong. That shame kind
Mhm.
of melts away. And then they can start thinking, well, what else could be true here?
Yeah.
What else is true?
Yeah. And I think we can also sort of model, for ourselves. Like, I think sometimes as parents of young adults, we think, oh, well, we just want to see our kids always doing it, quote unquote, the right way or whatever. And like I've in more recent years been like, you know what, mom's feeling anxious today. I'm feeling super anxious, or I'm feeling super overwhelmed by all this stuff that I got to get done. And it makes sense that I feel that way. And it's okay that I feel that way.
Yeah. Totally. I think that was one of the first things that really I had an experience where an emotion was very strong. It was anxiety, and I hadn't really experienced it to that level.
Mhm.
And I just remember my husband, and I've talked about this on the podcast before, but it was just like, oh my heck, I feel so anxious right now. And
Mhm.
I was trying to fix it.
Yeah.
And
Because
I'm
they,
like, "Well, actually, I just need to feel this for a second or whatever. Like, I just need to sit here for a minute. And that was my first time really processing the feeling of anxiety and reminding myself it's just something I'm thinking and it's fine. It's just sentences in my brain and it's fine. Like, this is what it feels like for me. And just actually going through that process and then being able to function after was just like the greatest lesson I could have ever had. Because now I get it. And when I teach my clients, it's like, it's really just being okay with whatever you're feeling is the most powerful place you can be, knowing that you're going to be just fine. It's
yeah.
okay.
Yeah. One of the things, right, we teach is, well, I think there's a lot of different definitions for self-confidence, but I think one of the really cool definitions of self-confidence is being willing to feel any emotion. And I think once we understand that emotions aren't wrong, there's nothing wrong with us, we aren't doing it wrong, we're not thinking wrong, then we can sort of surrender into that willingness to feel. And what we say to the clients is like, when you're willing to feel anything, what can you accomplish?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the answer is anything, which
Anything.
is super powerful.
Yeah. And I loved like how you said, like, we can model that as the parents
Mm-hmm.
verbalizing the emotion that we might be experiencing and normalizing the emotion is actually a really powerful example to our kids. Because I think sometimes we try to put on the happy face and just power through stuff for the sake of our kids. And I'm not saying like there aren't times then that we may want to do that, but I would say generally for me it was like, oh, I got to be the tough person. I just got to do it all and I just got to pretend like everything's okay so that everybody else is okay. But it really doesn't work that way.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with you. I think it's good for them to see that. And the other thing I've kind of been thinking about a little bit that I'll bring up here is this idea of emotional resilience. And I think, the church has got that emotional resilience course and things like that. And it's one of the things, we're talking a lot about with young adults, and that they are more emotionally resilient, and missionaries being more emotionally resilient. And I've been thinking a little bit about how we sort of see emotional resilience as a way to get out of negative emotion. It's sort of like we talk about it like let's say like anxiety is the river. We talk about emotional resilience as like, how do I get from here over there as fast as possible and get over it and get done with this as soon as
Yes. Yes.
I've been thinking about emotional resilience even more. And I do think that that's a good skill to have is like, how can I help myself sort of get through this and then come out on top and learn from it and all of that? I think that's all very valuable. But I think one of the things we might be missing in our own lives and with our young adults is how do we take care of ourselves in the river?
Mhm.
And I think just piggybacking on what we've already said is like, you can say to your kid or your young adult or, I'm just feeling really anxious today. And so this is what I'm going to do to take care of myself while I feel that way. And so how do we create, I think my podcast that comes out this week talks about this, and the only like visual I could have, because I'm just such a visual person, is like in that river, how do we create a boat that like has cotton in it and is like padded? So how do we like create a safe,
Yes.
compassionate place for ourselves to be human in that
Yes.
river?
Yes.
And sometimes that sadness is going to last longer than we think, or longer than we were hoping, or that overwhelm or that anxiety. But as long as we've created that safe, like kind of padded, comfortable cotton ball boat to take care
Yeah.
of ourselves in the
Yes.
river, that is where the magic is, I think,
Yes.
instead of like,
Yes.
just got to quickly get to that other side.
Yeah. I love that so much. This is so funny because I have a presentation tonight where I'm talking about emotion, and
Mm,
my illustration is the waves of emotion.
mm,
Like just being overtaken by these waves of emotion that
mhm.
toss us around. Like we can flow through them in
Yeah,
that soft boat, or we can just get hammered
right, right,
and really try really hard to get to the other side.
right.
So I love that illustration of just that nice cotton
Yeah,
padded boat that
yeah,
just takes care of us as we make our way down that river. Yeah.
yeah. And I think that that's kind of referring to what we were talking about earlier. It's like we've got the overwhelm, and then we can layer on shame that we shouldn't be this way. We shouldn't be feeling this way. We should be doing something different. Right. And that's what makes the waves really tumultuous, that shame and that guilt and that frustration with self. And I think of the boat as like a compassion, a self-love, a self-care, um, that makes it manageable and easier for us to navigate.
Yeah. And don't you think self-acceptance in there as well? Like accepting that our identity is a child of God and the love is consistent and we're human.
Mhm.
So we're divine and messy all at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
I
messy to
love
paint
that.
sometimes.
It's a messy. Yeah. There's strokes all over.
Yeah.
I
We get
love
it all
it.
over ourselves too.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. Well, you think of artists and it's like real artists get covered head to toe with their art. So, and what we are making is a masterpiece. The end,
For
right?
for sure.
So, just with a little bit of time left, I would love for you to share like what's one thing that the mothers or fathers, if they listen to this, that
Mhm.
they could just think about this week, or, to help them as they navigate this season of young adult kids and that may be struggling with some of the things that we've talked about. And we've shared a few, but if there was just one thing that they could take away from today, and then I would love for you to tell about your program that's in process, that's coming and already kind of started, but share a little bit about that and like how people can find you, things like that.
Sure. I guess the thing that comes to mind is just sort of a string of words, which is like meet them where they are. So if they're in the middle of that river, you just meet them there. And it's okay that they're there, and we're going to love them there, and and we're going to ask if they need help there. But I think so often with our kids and young adult kids, and I have one in particular right now that's kind of having a little bit of a struggle after his mission. I think we want to get them out of it so quickly. We want them to be different than they are. We want them to be on the other side of that river. And I think so, meet them where they are, but what's required in that, right, is our own surrender to God's plan, which was always going to include some anxiety and some fear and some loneliness and some sadness and some depression even from time to time. And so instead of just wishing that they were different, I just say, meet them where they are and ask how you can help them where they are and not need them to be different. And I think that that is also really applicable for ourselves as well. I think as parents, we're like, oh, if I could just this, and if I could just that, then this and that, and offer that same sort of surrender and compassion and meet yourself where you are. Like, even if one day you're like, I just can't even stand him today. I don't think that I could text with him. I don't think I can call him or your daughter or whatever. That's okay too, because that is also part of the human experience. So meet your kids where they are, wherever that is, even if it's a low place or a dark part of their painting, meet them where they are, but then do that for you as well. It's okay where you are.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah. And it maybe even meeting yourself where you are helps you to meet them where they are, right?
Totally.
It's like,
Yep.
oh, it's okay that I feel anxious about this or that I'm worried about them. That's
Mhm.
totally okay. So I'm going to go where they are and be there. So I
Yep.
love that. That's
Well, and I think
simple
it
but
also,
beautiful.
yeah, and I do think that it's it you got to sort of understand like when it feels compassionate to sort of take a step back and when it feels compassionate to engage. Like, for me at least, and maybe all the moms on here and dads on here are different, but for me, I'm not always up for getting into that river with them.
Mhm.
And so I have to be really onto myself and compassionate with myself about when I'm feeling full enough to do that. And I think that that's an important thing to
Yeah.
remember too.
Yeah. I love that. The way I phrase that is what is needed here.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so it's like, it might be needed that I set a boundary. It might be needed that I pull back. It might be needed that I drive right over. Right. But it's like, what will help everyone in the story
Mm-hmm.
is needed. What looks most like love? Well, maybe not talking to him today.
Or,
Maybe
and that
giving a little space.
Yeah, or like that might even be more loving for you, like what looks like
Mhm.
love for everybody in the story, including me. And I do think
Yes.
that's one thing we forget as missionaries, especially, is like, oh, well, we know how to love everybody else, but we forget to offer that to ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. So true. So true. I love that. Okay. So tell us about your program
Okay.
and then where can people learn more about it?
Yeah. So we have some super fun stuff coming. I've been coaching now for 4 years, working with missionaries in all different stages, and we have some fun stuff coming this fall for preparing missionaries. And I picture it much like a pre-MTC. And we're not going to call it that because the church gets the MTC acronym.
Right.
What we're calling it is Mission Prep Plus. And the reason I like the plus is because they probably have gotten a lot of mission prep leading up. Like, we would maybe say like FSY would count, or HXP would count, or going to live at your grandma's for a month would count, or whatever. And stakes offer mission prep. Usually, often people have taken a mission prep through their university or wherever they're going to school. And I'm calling this Mission Prep Plus because we're going to add in this mental and emotional piece that I feel like has been missing for a long time, maybe since the beginning,
Mm.
of how to really take care of ourselves mentally and emotionally while on the mission. And so the details are still like getting worked out a little bit, but picture it like a 2-week pre-MTC. And I think it's going to be mission changing and life changing for many, many people. I'm really, really thrilled about it. And we're working on like a really fleshed out like resource manual and links to podcasts and all of that kind of thing. So I'm really, really thrilled about that. And then in the meantime, of course, we're always offering like one-on-one coaching for preparing missionaries, currently serving missionaries and returned missionaries, which the one-on-one is really, really powerful. So that's kind of what's coming up, and people can go, I would just direct them maybe to my website, which is jenniedildine.com, spelled with an IE. Jennie spelled with an IE. I always know who my friends are because they spell it with an IE instead of a Y. Am I the only one that's picky about that?
No, I think that we like our names. Mine's not hard to get wrong. It's 4
Yeah.
letters.
Yeah.
I have never had anyone misspell Jill.
Jill.
Ever.
Pretty straightforward. Yeah. So you can just go to jenniedildine.com, and I've got tons of like free resources on there. And we'll be creating a new webpage for this new program and stuff like that here in the next few weeks. But the other place people can learn more from me is my podcast, which is the LDS Mission Podcast. And you can find it anywhere you get podcasts. And I think I'm on episode 115 or 116. Awesome. And so anybody who's getting ready to leave, just start listening. So one of the really fun things actually is that if people are interested, their missionary can actually listen to the podcast on Google Drive. And so it's a really fun thing that we're doing because missionaries have access to Google Drive. And I've gotten emails and messages from missionaries all over the world that are like, this podcast has completely changed my mission. And so if people are interested in that and think it would be something, it's all these coaching tools that we're talking about, mental and emotional health, mental and emotional resilience, all of that, self-love, self-compassion. But we also talk about like relationships with your companion, what happens if you have a difficult companion, all that good stuff. If they're interested in getting that, they can just email podcast@jenniedildine.com, and we'll make sure that you and your missionary get access to that via Google Drive. Super fun to think of those missionaries all over the world listening. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Making a difference one missionary at a time.
Mm-hmm.
So cool. Which not only helps them, it helps those they serve with.
Oh, totally.
Right? Like it's just the ripple effect is so amazing.
Totally.
By helping someone manage their mind.
Yeah.
It can't help but help relationships with companions or mission presidents or whatever.
Yeah. And not just because that person has changed, so that's going to change someone else, but I've like had different missionaries say, oh, we shared this concept in district council, or like, the companions will listen together. And I actually had one, I don't know if I ever told you about the strategy call that I got on with a sister missionary, and I was teaching her a little bit about facts and thoughts. And she was like, hold on a second. The mission president's wife taught this to us in our zone conference a few weeks ago.
Oh, you're like, yeah, that's this.
Yep. And come to find out, the mission president's wife was listening to my podcast. And,
that's incredible.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
It is impactful, this work. It does have a ripple effect for sure.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. It's been so good. I know that people are going to benefit from this conversation, and I'm excited to work alongside you in this work with these young adults. They're near and dear to my heart. And I just think if we can help them, it's just going to change the world. It really will change the world.
I agree. And I'm excited to have you on my team. Jill's an amazing coach, you guys. She's awesome.
Well, I've learned a lot. Even just this short time, I've learned so much from you. So thank you so much. And yeah, it's been awesome.
Thanks for having me. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening. If you like what you hear, I would love it if you would share it with your friends and family and leave me a rating and review. If you'd like to learn more about what life coaching is, please schedule a free discovery call with me where we can work together through something that's causing you a problem. Just go to my website, seasons-coaching.com, and you can also find information about my Seasons of Joy one-on-one coaching program and my Seasons of Joy community. Have a joyful week, and I'll see you next time.